This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about physical plant and life safety code. In chapter 675 of the state regulations and subchapter 5, and I list the pages there where you can find more information on the physical plant regulations, but I've kind of just listed a few of things you can look over and make sure that you have in place before surveyors come. So there is a requirement that you have to have facility storage, and the regulation reads that it's a minimum of 10 square feet per bed. So if you're a 100-bed licensed facility, then obviously you would have 1,000 square feet of storage available for resident items. And it's space that can be locked and be secure for residents' personal effects that maybe have to be kept somewhere else if they're not in the resident room. You have to have a separate room or building for yard equipment. And if there's fuel, oil, things like that, they have to be stored at least 30 feet away from any part of the building that is utilized by residents. So that includes even like your dining room or activity room, things like that, not just their rooms, but any room that could be utilized by a resident. All of those chemicals have to be, fuel or oil has to be at least 30 feet from the building. So I mentioned this earlier, but so NFPA, again, I encourage you to get that book if you don't already have one. But existing facilities don't necessarily have to conform with the current safety requirements for like finishes within your building if you can prove it's a financial hardship to bring things, up to current code. And so if you have an existing building, it's possible you could comply with NFPA 1981. But if you have any new construction, it must comply with NFPA 2012. And new construction could even mean remodeling. So if you touch it and there's wiring or plumbing involved, it's now new construction, and you have to come up with NFPA. You have to be up to date with NFPA 2012. I mentioned that there's NFPA 2021, but CMS just hasn't adopted it yet. All of your windows are required to have screens. So interestingly enough, when COVID first hit and we were having window visits, I literally would have to walk the building every day because families kept taking the screens off. I don't know what in the world that was making me crazy, but anyway, every room, resident room, they're all required to have screens. Windows must be operable without the use of a tool, so in case you had to escape out the window. Grab bars must have sufficient strength and anchorage to sustain a concentrated load of 250 pounds. You want a resident to be able to grab that grab bar and keep them up and then not fall. I will tell you that there are a couple of life safety code inspectors that will literally walk through your building, grab that grab bar and yank and make sure that it doesn't come off the wall. So you need to be walking your halls randomly, maybe we personally put it on our calendar, and every month we check every single grab bar in the building just to be sure. Any rooms containing, let's get down here. Any rooms containing heat producing equipment like a boiler in the laundry room, they have to be insulated, ventilated to prevent any floor surface above from exceeding a temperature 10 degrees above the ambient room temp. If you're a multi-level building, you must have at least one elevator for every 59 residents, 2 elevators for 60 to 200, 3 elevators if you have 201 to 350 residents. Boilers. If you have boilers in your building, if one boiler breaks down, the requirement is you must have a second boiler that shall be at least 70% of the total required capacity of a boiler, so that you don't want to ever be down. All piping in your HVAC system, if you have a water system, a 2-pipe or a 4-pipe system, all of that piping has to be color-coded and marked for easy identification. Resident rooms, they shall have general lighting and night lighting. So just being sure that you have those different lights available for each resident. Call lights in the bathrooms, they must be reachable by a collapsed resident lying on the floor. So that includes inclusion of a pull cord. So it's not that the item on the wall doesn't have to be within reach, but the pull cord has to be within reach. So one of the things that I really had to work on training our housekeeping staff is that when you go in and you're mopping and you put that pull cord up higher so that you don't get it wet, they would put it around the grab bar, and I'd have to say, no, can't do that. That has to be down on the ground so that they can reach it at all times. So anyway, just something to watch for. Before you begin any kind of construction at your building, you're adding a dining room or you're expanding a room or you're adding on anything, you have to go through the Oklahoma State Department of Health, and it's called plan review. And so the health department has an architect that has to approve your plans. And then once you start that project, you have to call them when you get to 50%, because then they come out and they'll do an inspection to make sure everything's going according to their requirements. And then you call them at the end and they'll do an inspection before they'll sign off on it where you can actually use it. So they'll tell you, you know, yes, you can start using that dining room, or yes, you can start using that room once they've approved the final project. You must have a maintenance program in place. There has to be something documented that shows that you are doing continual maintenance, preventative maintenance of all your facility and the equipment. Obviously, you have to be free of infestations of insects, pests, and rodents. You should check the outside of your building on a regular basis, looking for any holes in the walls or roofs. Entrances, exits, steps, and outside walkways shall be kept reasonably free from ice, snow, and other hazards. When you go outside any of the exits at your building, again, you just want to make sure that it's being addressed. Surveyors will tag you if they go out and there's ice right out there where you would go out of your exit. In addition to that, every exit has to have 2 lights. That way, if one light goes down, there's still lighting in case you had to exit out that door at night. Storage areas, attics, roofs, basements, they all have to be kept safe and free from accumulations of extraneous materials such as refuse, discarded furniture, and old newspapers. So we have a mechanical room that has our boilers and water softener and all that kind of good stuff, and I would have to watch that. If my staff were taking something out of commission, there was a lift not working, or maybe a bed not working, or they were trying to get a room ready and the previous resident, you know, left a piece of furniture. They kept taking it out there. I'm like, okay, you can't have this stuff out in this room. And so just making sure that staff are educated on, can't have anything like that in your mechanical rooms or storage areas. All right, moving on. Life safety code, okay. We're going to talk about fire watch, which right below this list, I'm just scrolling, I'll go back, is the fire watch. This is the actual code from the State Health Department. So we'll just talk about it while we're here. The main thing to remember about a fire watch is that, for one, life safety code is K-tags. I'm gonna pull that up. Let's see, Vanessa. Here it is. When surveyors come in your building, so typically the nurses all show up first, they do their tour, they do their thing, and about day 2, 3 into your survey, then a life safety code inspector comes. When the life safety code inspector comes, this is what he or she has in their hand. And so it's the Fire Safety Survey Report 2012. I encourage you to make sure you have a copy of this. If you want me to send you a copy of it, again, just include your name in the chat or send it to my email address, and I'll be happy to get that to you. So if you, in case you closed out. there's my email. So anyway, I'll send you a copy of this. So I encourage you to hand this to your maintenance director, facilities person, and then just have them scroll down and just go item by item by item to make sure that you're in compliance. Anyway, so I'll send that to you. That's Eileen. Okay, Firewatch. So a Firewatch is if something happens to your system, whether it's your automatic sprinkler system or your fire alarm system. So your automatic sprinkler system, let's say that you're having even just your annual inspection, or something is wrong and it's down for repairs. If it is down for more than 10 hours in a 24-hour period, you must start a fire watch, which is at KTAG 354. If your fire alarm system, so the actual alarm itself, if it's down for more than 4 hours, you must start a fire watch. Fire watch is somebody who is going to do nothing but assess your building for potential for fires. The tricky thing is you have to notify your local fire department, and obviously you're going to document everything you do. It cannot just be anybody who does this fire watch. According to the regulations, so right here on C, you can only use public safety persons, a guard service, or a staff person if they've been trained according to NFPA 1001 as a firefighter 1, which is a lot of training and expensive. So we actually call one time when we had our system down for more than 4 hours, we called our local fire department, and then they called an off-duty person who came in and provided that service to us. Sometimes volunteer firefighters may have people as well. All right, so that's that. Going back up, sorry. Okay, so that's a fire watch. Sprinkler system checks located at KTAG 353 and K361. If you have any issues with your sprinkler system, be sure you document it and document the correction that you do. How to get that off there. Your sprinkler heads must be free of debris, paint, grease. You'll want to go into areas that are moist, your shower rooms, things like that, to make sure that they're not collecting dust. Be sure you tell your activity people, no, you cannot hang balloons from those sprinkler heads. You must have an annual inspection, and it has to be conducted by a licensed company. And then you also have quarterly inspections, which your employees can do if they are trained by a licensed inspector. So of course you want to document that. Most of the companies, Johnson Controls, places like that, they will provide that training. Of course you pay for it if you want to. I'm going to see if there's a way. There we go. Okay. Fire alarm system. Again, annual inspections by licensed companies only. When we do our drills, we use canned smoke. You can buy canned smoke. It sets off the smoke detectors. Your system must be monitored where someone can see, hear it 24/7. So a lot of places put them at the nurses' stations. We have it right behind our front receptionist in our building, but it has to be where someone can hear it and get to the panel 24/7. Your pull stations have to be 3.5 to 4.5 feet above the floor level and within 5 feet of all exits. So back in the day, pull stations were, I don't know, they were higher in our building and probably in many buildings. And then the regulation suddenly changed and said, hey, we want to make sure that your people, in wheelchairs can also pull the pull station if needed. So we lowered all of our pull stations. Within less than 24 hours, fire alarm goes off. Our panel tells us it's at this pull station. We go to the pull station, and then here sits my precious sweet resident. And I'm like, oh, why'd you pull the pull station? She said, it said pull. Like, yes, you're right. So we end up putting covers on all of ours, with the bar that can break the cover, but just kind of know your folks and what may happen there. someone cannot travel more than 200 feet to get to a pull station. So measure those things. What's interesting about the life safety code inspectors is that, you know, one year they're looking at one thing, the next year they're looking at something else. You may have had something in your building for 20 plus years, and then suddenly someone comes in and goes, hey, that pull station's further than 5 feet from the exit, and then they write you a tag for it. So be sure you're checking these things and just don't assume that your building is already in compliance. Next, portable fire extinguishers. So they have to be annually inspected by a professional company. Your own staff could do the monthly inspection, which involves them checking to make sure that the fire extinguisher is full and not in the red where it says, you know, needs to be filled. So your own staff can do that, and then they sign the ticket. Fire extinguishers have to have a maintenance inspection every 6 years. They have to go through hydrostat testing every 12 years. My encouragement to you is find a company that does this for you so you don't have to worry about it. Jackie, I'm going to come back to your question when we finish this section. Great question. Okay. Smoke barriers. So you can have smoke doors that provide 20-minute fire protection rating. They have to be at least 1.75-inch solid bonded core doors. They must be self-closing or held open on those automatic releasing devices so that if your alarm system goes off, it releases the magnet as doors shut automatically. The smoke barrier doors cannot be blocked open. I tell my staff always be cognizant of those doors, whether it's the 2-hour fire doors or the smoke doors. One, so that if the alarm goes off, it doesn't hit a resident that might be sitting there in their wheelchair or something. But secondly, we want to make sure it closes all the way because its whole purpose is to block the smoke from getting through. If you have a hole in your smoke barrier door or wall, if you are running wires for some reason, you must fill in that hole with material that has a 30-minute fire resistance rating. Fire drills. All staff must participate. So your housekeepers, your dining service, your office folks, every single person, they can't just leave it to the clinical folks. Everybody must participate in that fire drill. Have a plan with specific duties assigned. Make sure that there's someone in charge in case there is a real fire. You must conduct a drill quarterly on every single shift. So every 3 months, every shift, day shift, afternoons, nights, we have a separate weekend shift. They all have to have at least one drill per quarter. Night shift, we have this kind of cardboard fire that we ordered, and we place it somewhere, and then we go to the desk and we say, we do a walkthrough. We say, hey, there's a fire in 301. What are you going to do? And then we make them walk through it. We don't sound the alarm. We don't wake up the residents, but we make them actually walk through it. Don't just talk about it, because the more you actually can get physically involved and do it, the better off you'll be. Do it at unexpected times, under different conditions, and obviously you want to talk about it at the end. What went wrong? What could we have done better? What did we do right? Okay. Exit access corridors, exit doors. The halls cannot be blocked. And if there are items in the hall, everything has to be on one side. So from one end of the hall, I will look down the hall and I have to think, all right, if we had to evacuate right now, is it an obstacle course, or can I really make it down that hallway safely? So I remind myself, look, it's okay that the medication aid is there, the housekeeper is there, maybe a laundry cart, but they all need to be on the same side of the hallway. They have to be items that can be moved quickly. Exit halls and doors have to be clearly recognizable From anywhere you are standing in your nursing home, you must be able to see an exit sign. So if you are standing in your hall and you look down the hall, can you see an exit sign? If not, you need to add one. The exit signs, they must have continuous illumination and served by your emergency lighting system. There has to be 2 bulbs per sign, and you need to be checking them monthly. When you go to an exit sign, and we have a stick that we use, you push the button. Sometimes it's on the side, usually it's on the bottom. You push the button and you see it go from power, and then it forces it to go onto the battery. And so you want to make sure you still have illumination, and that's how you check to make sure it's really going to work in case your power goes out. Emergency lights. So you always have to be able to see how to get out of the building. So illumination of means of egress. If one bulb fails, there's another one so that there's not an area of darkness in the building. They must last at least an hour and a half if your power goes off. You need to test your lights for 30 minutes every month and annually for 90 minutes. If you have a generator and you are doing generator test, it takes care of this for you. Your kitchen hood and suppression system. So I'm sure Z has told you this, but we are so super duper highly regulated. And NFPA 101, which is the life safety code, is not the only NFPA book that nursing homes have to comply with. There's like, I don't know, feels like there's 100 of them, but that's probably a small exaggeration. But there's no K tag exactly for kitchen hood and suppression system. But there is a tag found in the NFPA 96 in Chapter 5 and in Chapter 10 that talks about kitchen hoods and suppression systems in healthcare facilities. And it says that the hood ducts and the vents must be professionally cleaned every 6 months. Obviously, we want to be, cleaning them off often, but they have to be professionally cleaned every 6 months. And when the life safety code inspector comes in, they're going to check those dates and make sure that you have a document to prove that they were there every 6 months. And then the actual suppression system, so that sprinkler system that's over anything that has a flame in your kitchen hood system, those have to be inspected every 6 months as well. So the rest of your sprinkler system in your building, once a year, but the sprinkler system, which is the suppression system and Ansel system in your kitchen, is every 6 months. Again, have documentation, hire a professional to come out and do that. Corridor room doors and halls. Your doors must latch securely when closed. We have a life safety code inspector that they will literally go down the hallway, close the door to a resident room, and then push. And they're trying to make sure that door is going to stay latched. Again, preventing a fire from getting in that room. If you are shutting that room to that resident room, or shutting the door to that resident room, you want to make sure you're protecting them from fire. So if it doesn't latch, then there's that possibility that then smoke gets into that room. Door gaps, they allow a 1/2 inch around the door, 1 inch at the bottom. So I literally had a life safety code inspector who would take a quarter and see if they could, roll it under the door. Anyway, so 1 inch at the bottom, 1/2 inch. Cooking facilities, they do allow, you can have cooking equipment like for warming things or for limited cooking, like if you're doing an activity where you're baking cookies, you can have an oven even, but it has to be safe where residents, can't hurt themselves, but you can have those things and make cookies or other things that you're using like for an activity. Power cords, extension cords. Having the right power cord for any kind of patient care related equipment, IVs, tube feeding equipment, things like that, they have to meet the UL 1363. The regulation changed in 2012 where they finally allowed extension cords for temporary use only, like when you have a Christmas tree, but you can't have extension cords all the time. You can't, like if you go into your employee break room, make sure that they don't have extension cords running in there to plug in whatever, the microwave or things like that. In the resident room, make sure the families aren't bringing in extension cords and plugging in things that shouldn't be plugged in. You can have power bars. They're the UL rated, but not extension cords. All right. Of course, there's a rule for alcohol-based hand rub dispensers. And oh my, have we all come to get to know those things well in the last 2 years. So they can only be installed in corridors that are at least 6 feet wide, minimum 4-foot horizontal spacing between them. And there is a maximum capacity, which again is kind of craziness, but just kind of make sure that you're in compliance with that one. Smoking, obviously not allowed in resident rooms, any rooms that have flammable liquids, combustible gases, O2. If you have ashtrays at your facility, they have to be non-combustible material, metal containers that have self-closing cover devices. Hazardous areas. So a hazardous area, furnace rooms, laundries, repair shops, trash collection rooms, combustible storage rooms, anything that may have an excess amount of paper products like toilet paper, paper towels, even medical records, things like that. Your soiled linen rooms, those are all considered a hazardous area. Those doors must latch securely, and you can't have gaps, that half-inch gap between the door and the frame. At the bottom of this page, this is just a little snippet from our preventative maintenance schedule that we make up. So you can see like the very first column, it's annual fire alarm system, which York provides ours for us. It's due in August. The next one is in assisted living. We have the annual fire marshal, and he comes out every February. But we want to make sure we don't miss these things. Our boiler inspections, fire extinguisher inspections, fire extinguishers and exit signs, you can see. The sprinkler test is annual, the quarterly sprinkler test, and then typically when our inspections happen here at UV. Anyway, just creating a preventative maintenance so you don't miss anything. Put it in your, Outlook or however you want to do it. We covered the fire watch, so we're moving on. You have to have an impairment plan for your fire watch. The nice thing is this right here gives it to you. This is just a perfect thing to copy and use as your impairment plan, but you have to have it per code. This handout just shows you, it gives you the actual provider letter from the state about the air conditioning and comfort levels. I kind of talked about it already with the degrees and how they want you to check it between 3:30 and 5:30 p.m. So isn't anything we didn't already talk about? Okay, so moving on. All right, here's a nice life safety code checklist that can kind of help. We talked about the mechanical rooms. It goes into probably a little more detail, but just no grills or vents indoors. We kind of talked about everything else. Having fire dampers installed at duct penetrations of walls. The ceiling installed completely. Kitchen, nothing we didn't talk about. Laundry. So in your laundry rooms, making sure that your staff are checking the lint container, because that is one thing your life safety code inspector will do. Will go and check, and they just want to make sure that your staff's emptying it every single day, and that there's not a bunch of debris behind the dryers where heat can be produced, that there's not a bunch of trash or dust and looks like it hadn't been cleaned in forever. Soiled linen room must be self-closing and latch automatically. Receptacle containers. 1 hour firewall rated construction. So your door and then the walls around your soiled linen room all have to be 1 hour fire rated. Your oxygen room, where you store your oxygen, they have to be vented to the outside. So during COVID, we created an oxygen room in our COVID unit so that we would not, have to come out. We literally tried to have dedicated staff, dedicated equipment, and have everything there possible that we might need. So we created this little storage closet, and sure enough, we had a COVID inspection anyway. So the surveyor's like, hey, this has to be vented to the roof. And I was like, yes, I knew that. Anyway, so just something to watch for. All right. And again, it has to be 1 hour fire rated as well. Storage rooms, we talked about. Patient rooms, the window. Cubicle curtains must be flame retardant. Sometimes surveyors will ask to see the proof. If it's not on the privacy curtain itself, then you need to have a letter from your vendor to say that these are flame retardant. No portable space heaters in the resident rooms. You can have them in offices, not in resident rooms. Corridors, exits, talked about all of that. Stairways, if you have them, they need to be 1 hour fire rated as well. Self-closing doors, don't store anything in the stairwell. Exit signs, we talked about. So if your power goes out and you go onto your generator, that has to occur within 10 seconds. If it doesn't, you need to call your generator company and they need to come out and adjust it, because once the power goes off, within 10 seconds, that generator has to bring power back on. Smoking, talked about. Okay. Electrical. Switch and outlet covers installed and not damaged. I absolutely love and adore my nurses, but there is nothing nurse proof, nada. So, they'll push the bed up against the wall, break an outlet cover, things happen. So make sure that all your receptacle plates and everything, that they're not damaged. You get those replaced, as soon as possible if that happens. Panels are installed on the electric equipment. There's a 3-foot clearance. So we have a storage room that has electrical panels, and then we also has a space for storing like extra wheelchairs and other different equipment. But I took red paint and I painted this 3 feet in front of the panel because they kept putting things in front of it, and I'm like, I gotta bring it to their attention to make sure that they are really allowing that 3 feet space from the electrical panel. Circuit breaker panels have to be labeled. Be sure to check them because over time things can fall off. Kitchen range hood we talked about. One of the things on those kitchen range hood suppression systems, make sure those nozzles that the plastic end actually stays on there. If it's getting dirty, greasy, whatever, clean those things. Be sure that the cover is staying on the nozzles. Fire extinguishers we talked about. All right. Generator. Annual inspection of your generator has to be by a licensed company. Keep a log. So we keep a log every time we run a generator test, because you must do a monthly load test for 30 minutes. You have to record the time. Started at 12, stopped at 12:30. Again, switching from emergency power has to happen within 10 seconds. Keep a log. And honestly, the surveyor just wants to know that you really are running those tests, even if you're just hand documenting that you're running that test. Fire drills. So look at this. This is what you need to tell your staff. Obviously, you're trying to do them as much as you can at unannounced times and not all on the same day, but there needs to be 90% attendance. So you do it on different shifts, and at least 90% of the people in the building need to participate. So that's actually a requirement. Corridor, fire, and smoke barrier walls. Again, be sure there's no penetrations that haven't been caulked with the fire caulk. Exits, can't be anything impeding the path. The discharge path must be a smooth, hard surface. The dual bulbs, mentioned that earlier, so there has to be at least 2 lights outside every exit so that if one fails, the other one can still provide lighting. Okay, I covered all of that. I wanted to provide this letter. This is on fire and smoke door annual testing requirements. Basically, you want to make sure that all of your doors are working as they're supposed to. If you have doors with crash bars, the crash bars are working. Make sure that when you purposely, set off your alarm so that you're testing that the doors are closing flush. We are very close to Arkansas River, as I mentioned, and so, I mean, you can hit water not very far below our building, and so sometimes we have shifting on sand, and we have to make sure that you know, that we don't have any problems with our doors closing flush. All right, so anyway, there's that code that you can read. Okay, and it tells you right here, non-rated doors are not subject to this testing. Okay, so this came out in 2017, which is, they made some changes, which were good. So some of this, there's that fire and door inspection. In Appendix A of Chapter 675, hot water use, you need to be checking the temperatures because the inspector will check. They'll go to like a sink in a resident's bathroom and turn on the hot water and make sure that it's reaching temp. But so bathing temp is 115, for washing 120, rinsing is 180 in the kitchen, and then laundry is 160. You can now, in a PA 2015, you can now have wall mounted items in your corridors, so in your hallways that are at least 6 feet wide, and so nothing can protrude out more than 6 inches. And they now allow certain wheeled equipment that's left unattended. Back in the day, you couldn't even leave a laundry cart out if it wasn't being used. You had to put it away. Well, now they say, you know what, if it's on wheels, you can leave it out there because it is on wheels. You can move it fast to get it out of the way if you need to open up that hallway. And in your fire safety plan, you need to include that to say items left on wheels will be quickly moved into, blah, 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 closet, resident room, whatever. They now allow fixed furniture in hallways if your hallways are at least 8 feet wide. So, they finally got it that our residents walk up and down the hall, and sometimes falls were occurring because you're not going to stop them from walking because they don't remember or think to sit down sometimes, right? To rest. So if you can have a piece of furniture halfway down your hall, like a small couch, as long as it doesn't make your hallway less than 6 feet, then you're allowed to have this furniture on one side of the hall. You can disguise doors. Like if you have residents that are typically redirectable, or you just have residents that wander, you can disguise the door to look like maybe bookshelves or something else, as long as you cannot cover the panic bar, the lever handle. So that cannot be part of the disguise. $30 less. Here was the limited cooking. So like if you have a physical therapy or occupational therapy room, and part of what they're doing is teaching these people how to cook safely, right, when they go back home. And so that's now allowed. And again, the activities people, as long as they're doing something just for that activity, you cannot make a whole meal, is what they're saying. Combustible decorations are now allowed in the resident rooms. Limit on the percentage. Dun, dun, dun. They now allow gas and electric fireplaces. Not within an individual sleeping room, and the controls must be locked in a sealed glass front. Obviously, you're trying to protect them, but if you want it for ambiance or whatever, they now allow it. Electronic cigarettes, so vape pens, whatever people call them, they are not allowed because they're not FDA approved. And most fire incidences from those vape pens or whatever, because people plug them into an unapproved power source like laptops and other crazy things. This is more on that an easier, quicker summary about the door opening and the testing on those, inspecting the doors. I encourage you to, when you're training your staff on life safety code and just kind of some things to look for, I just Google and find little activities like this, like let's look for hazards ahead of time before it becomes an issue. And so this is just one example of some safety hazards in an office. And so it gives you the answers there, but I gave them all like a big one. And then I said, okay, identify all the hazards. There are 12 of them. And then they had to find things like this arm being left up on the paper cutter and how that could, if a resident were to walk in that office, they could get hurt or different things like that. So anyway, that was just kind of an activity. And that is the end of that handout. Let me close that because I have another. Close current tab. Oh, yep. So this is another one I use because we forget. You walk past things so often and we forget what's in the building. So I tell them, you know what? You draw a floor plan of where you're at. Include the corridors, the hallways, the entrances, resident rooms, nurses stations. You just kind of have them draw where they're at. If they work in the kitchen, I have them draw the kitchen. Anyway, and then I split it up. I use markers, but you could use dots or whatever. So they're supposed to identify anything that might be a safety hazard, like electrical, a blocked dial, maybe a slippery floor, something that could be a potential fire safety hazard, and they have to mark it with green. And then red, we're marking health hazards like chemicals, bloodborne pathogens, infectious materials, temperatures like attic spaces, things like that, place that could be too hot, and then blue for ergonomic. And it just kind of helps them remember, like a water fountain could be a potential. And it just reminds them, you always look near the water fountain to make sure there's not water on the floor. Just kind of helps bring it to mind. So anyway, this is just one activity you might be able to use with your staff. There's that one. Okay, tag I'll send you. And okay, this was just an extra handout for emergency preparedness, but I'm going to scroll down. There's the cyber tag. I think I have one more thing on here. Emergency water plan. So life safety code, they want to make sure you have an emergency water plan as well. This is just it's kind of a policy that you could use. Obviously, good place to go there. Legionella. They want to make sure that you're taking steps to prevent Legionella because it can happen in healthcare facilities, and it causes it can cause a bad type of pneumonia for people who might be compromised. And so they tell you you want to look and make sure that you're cleaning, like having somebody come and de-lime, hiring a company, or whether it's your staff doing it. The places where Legionella can grow, like CPAP machines, those things definitely need to be cleaned. We can't just let them sit there and keep getting all nasty and gunky. But water heaters, pipes, shower heads, hoses. If you have an outside, fountain, eye wash stations is another big one. We just don't use them very often. And so is somebody going and cleaning those things? Ice machines need to be regularly cleaned. We hire a company to come. We've got like 7 in the building, so we have them come to do that. Anyway, just kind of a reminder to be sure that those things are being cleaned. They're on part of your preventative maintenance system. Here's a handout on just on, how to get rid of mold. All right, then on that one, okay, I'm gonna leave that open so I can send that to you later. I'm going to look at Jackie. Okay, so reached out to the person in charge of emergency preparedness, stated due to the pandemic, we're exempt from full-scale exercise. Do you know if that is the case? So that is correct. There's several 1135 waivers still in place due to the pandemic. CNAs being trained and people's licenses. They've, finally come up with a new way for CNAs to renew easier. And anyway, one of the things was about these exercises. I will tell you that my recommendation is that all because you can get by with not doing it, I would do it anyway. Because the reality is an incident could still occur even though there's a pandemic, because tornadoes don't stop just because there's a pandemic. Oh, how I wish they wouldn't all happen at the same time. But so I encourage you to do it. Obviously, you have to take into consideration this now presents additional things to worry about, like what if the home that normally I would send my residents to as part of my evacuation has COVID cases? Move on to the next home, or do they have a great COVID unit that's separate, so I don't have to worry about my residents going over there and maybe contracting COVID? So it just presents another challenge to the situation, but I encourage you to go ahead and do your full-scale exercises. Again, firemen don't mind coming. Your emergency management people are the best ones to reach out to, and that can help you complete your full-scale exercise. So great question, Jackie. Appreciate that. All right. So Z, we are good to go here unless anybody wants to throw another question out.